folks, Greg Marchand here. Welcome to another episode of the Virtual Instructor-Led Training Program brought to you by the TechNet Sales Academy. In this episode, we're going to talk about managing multiple generations or managing the generation gap. Okay? However you want to think about it, you all work with some folks that are pretty young, maybe even 15, 16, 17 years old, and then maybe some older folks still around. I know some shops got some 90-plus individuals still hanging around. The original generation that started that shop. So there can be some significant challenges, right? And hopefully by the end of this seminar, you'll know, and better understand anyway, what motivates 4 generations of coworkers. And understand the key components that go into bridging that gap, bringing everybody together so that you can improve communication within your organization in just 10 minutes a day. Look, it doesn't take a ton of time, but you do have to have a lot of understanding and a willingness to work together. So let's get started. This is scary to me. Currently, there are 4 generations of individuals that work side by side in the workforce. They estimate that in just 3 years from now, in 2020, it's going to be 5 generations working together. You know, it used to be you retired at 62 years old and got out of the workforce. And that is no longer the case anymore, as you are well aware, I am sure. I know people in their 80s still going to work every day, or at least every other day. And then you can have 16, 17-year-olds coming into the workplace, and that's going to give you 5 generations. So this generational challenge, generational attitude, generational whatever you want to call it, is not likely to go away anytime soon at all. So let's learn to work with it. Shops have older service advisors working with young techs. Sometimes we've got young advisors with older techs, young owners with older employees. That can be a big challenge, actually. And any number of these combinations. So we've got multiple generations, older, younger, however you want to put it together, that have to work together. And multiple generations, as you well know, can cause challenges, right? I mean, there's hiring challenges, there's interviewing challenges, communicating challenges, just within the shop during the day. This is also true with your customers as well, isn't it? Because a lot of these challenges come out of the attitudes, and then they affect the workplace comfort, or they affect customer satisfaction, or they affect how smooth the day runs, or how much work actually gets done sometimes. So all of these things are what we need to bridge the generation gap in order to deal with, because it affects your productivity, which means your money gets affected at the end of the day. So what do we do to begin to bridge these gaps? The first thing we got to do is begin to understand who these people are that we're dealing with. And when we look to hire somebody, what are we looking for in an employee? I mean, are we looking for a certain generation? No, probably not. We're looking for somebody who's got some knowledge, got some technical skill, especially if they're a technician, right? But even if they're a service advisor, we're still looking for that. We're looking for good communication skills, really, no matter who it is that we're hiring. You want good communication skills in an employee, right? Okay, so what else do you want? What about a hard worker? What about somebody that believes in what you stand for? Is there anything else that you might look for when you hire an employee? Sure. But can you find all of this in one individual? Well, yes, Greg, that's the promised land is what that is. That's Valhalla. But think about this. Multiple generations bring all of this. They bring experience. They bring loyalty. They bring the technical skill set or the technical knowledge. There are certain generations that are extremely hardworking. There's mission fulfillment attitudes with some of them. You can bring all of this together to your organization just in pieces, in multiple people, because it's highly unlikely you're going to fill your organization with individuals, even one individual, that has all of these skill sets. So it's really important to figure out how to work together, because you have to have respect, right? And with multiple generations, you can have respect issues. With certain generations, you can have respect issues. There's diversity challenges. Let's not make diversity challenges any more than what they already are by not learning to deal with multiple generations. And then there's cultural differences that exist generationally, amongst the older generation and the younger generation. We're gonna describe and define what these generations are. But just think about the diversity challenges, the cultural challenges, sometimes the respect challenges that you observe maybe at work right now. With more, there's learning challenges, right? There's management challenges because of all these other things. There's hiring challenges, but we already talked about that. And still, motivational challenges. I hear about this all the time. Greg, how do I motivate my people? Reporting relationships. I'm not answering to him, he's younger than me. I'm not answering to that old man, he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go on. So it's really important that we learn to communicate, that we learn to understand just what we're dealing with and be willing to work on it. Because that's the big thing, folks. You can watch this, you can read whatever you want, you can go to whatever seminars there are out there. My friend Bill Haas does a good one. But if you're not willing to do anything, if you're not willing to work on this, what's it all for? What is it all for? So we're going to talk more about working on this in a little bit. Right now, I just want you to remember that successfully managing this gap, these multiple generations, it takes management. Even if you're a service advisor, even if you're a technician, especially if you're a service manager, and especially if you're a shop owner, it takes management. Because all these parties have to interact. And they've got to do it continuously. And they've got to learn to communicate, and they've got to learn to take responsibility for doing this. Because, as I say in many, many classes and many of these programs, absolutely nothing functions in isolation. And so you have to take responsibility for this. You know, I was doing a class out of Vision in Kansas City for Vision 2017 just last weekend. And I made a comment to a class that a gentleman asked me a question, you know, how do you, if you've got 6 technicians that are doing this and it's kind of always been that way and they've been with you for a long time, you know, how do you get change to happen? The same way you get change to happen here or anywhere. You have to be the change. I know it sounds cliche, but what it means is that if you yourself, watching this today, don't take responsibility for helping with some of these generational challenges, nobody else may be likely to do it. It has to begin with you. No excuses, no waiting for somebody else, no waiting for something to happen, or the person to move on, or somebody else to get hired. You have to be the change that you want to see. And again, I know it's cliche, but it's the truth. You have to do it. It has to start with you. And once it starts with you, then the other parties will begin to get engaged with it. Look, the truth is you won't always agree, but that's okay. You can still learn from each other, and you'll likely have more in common than differences. And I've observed that. I've seen that. I've watched people, when they get to know each other, and they're in the same industry, and they start to figure out that they actually have more in common than they have things apart. And then magic began to happen. Tolerance increased. They began to hang out outside of work. Productivity increased. Customer satisfaction increased because of all of this. So yes, you're not always going to agree. That's okay. It's healthy for us not to agree. It's healthy for you not to agree with me, or me not to agree with you. And the same for those that you work with. It's perfectly okay. But you can't let it get in the way. So let's talk about some of the general characteristics of these workplace generations. And these are generalizations, all right? This isn't all set in stone. Some of you watching this may say, oh yeah, you know what, that's me. And then that's bullet point, you go, oh, that's not me. And that's true for all of us. Just because we put these generalizations in place doesn't mean that we want to paint anybody into a corner, all right? You could be a cross between a baby boomer and a Gen Yer, or a Gen Xer, whichever one comes first. Let's check it out and find out, all right? So again, keep it in mind, these are general categorizations. They may not hold true for all of you or with everyone you work with, And as with everything, there's nothing absolute here. These are some things to think about. And again, as I say with most of my programs, most of my classes, you don't have to agree with everything you see here in this program. But I hope that you come into it with an open mind and think about how you might be able to make some changes within your organization for the better. Okay? So the first one we have here, and I see there's no picture with it, are traditionalists. Traditionalists, what are these? These are the oldest generation we generally work with. Okay? Now, I'm going to modify the numbers a little bit, because as time goes on, definitions will change a little bit, because I hate to say it, but we're all getting a little bit older. So generally, traditionalists are somewhere between 65 and 90 years old. You could go even older than 90 if you've got, a 95-year-old man or woman that started your shop hanging out there every day. All right, because they're a part of your culture, they're within the organization. So just think of this as 65 and over. And because of the way they grew up, and the reason that generations are the way they are, is because of their environment, the way that they were nurtured growing up, the global events that happened, the attitudes in society. Possibly it's where they come from in the world, which microcosm of the world that they come from, that forms these attitudes. So if you take this information and you go over to Europe, it will not apply. The definitions will be a little bit different. You'll still be able to categorize these people, but the definitions will be a little bit different. In terms of Americans, an American traditionalist, 65 years and above, many of their lives were defined by World War II, if they're old enough, the Great Depression, if they were old enough, the feeling of Americanism, radio. It was and you could probably add television here as well. It was these things that pulled everybody together. When I think of traditionalists, I think of my grandfather, who unfortunately has passed away, quite a few years ago now. But for him, the Great Depression formed who he was. It formed everything that he did. Now, as a kid growing up, I didn't realize this. I thought it was kind of strange that he would go to the landfill to take the trash, and he'd come back with more stuff than he brought. Well, you know why? The Great Depression. He'd get to the landfill and go, why are they throwing this out? This is a good piece of plywood. This is a good 2x4. Hey, look at this table. And he would bring it home and stick it in the garage. Now, he'd give it away to somebody. He wouldn't sell it. Of course, they didn't have eBay back then either, so maybe he would have made some extra money that way. I don't know. But my point here is that the Great Depression formed who he was and what he stood for, and the strength of family and some entrepreneurial spirit. Nobody's going to do it for you. You got to go take care of yourself. Let's not waste, things like that. So traditionalists, defined by things that happened a long time ago. Many of you are young enough, you don't even remember it now. Traditionalist characteristics, generally very, very loyal, very hard-working individuals usually, and stable workforce. They did not generally move from job place to job place. They tended to be loyal, and that loyalty, I should say, created stability in terms of the workplace. So hardworking, loyal, probably not likely to go anywhere. They're obviously experienced because they're older at this point. They tend to be extremely respectful and extremely conservative. Again, a product of the age in which they were brought up. They're also, oftentimes, not always, but many times, most of the time, team-oriented. And so they can make some great employees. Are they incredibly productive? No, not at this point. They've slowed down quite a bit. But they are motivated by pride and by loyalty. And so if you want to know how to motivate a traditionalist, this is what you need to pay attention to. And if you want to bridge those generation gaps and get the most out of each generation that's working within your environment, your operation, your organization, your shop, you've got to pay attention to what the motivations are so that we can leverage those motivations. Traditionalists, pride, loyalty were their big motivators. You can use financial motivators, you can use loyalty rewards, things like bonuses or rewarding time on the job, maybe rewarding them with some sort of job security. thus the lock. I thought that was weird at first, but I'm like, all right, yeah, I see why the guy that did this put that in there for me. Okay. Specified parking, employee of the month programs, discounts, priority parking, priority in whatever goes on around the shop. You will find that they'll respond very, very well to these types of motivational tools. Other generations will not. So understand what motivates them, loyalty, pride, teamwork, and use whatever motivational tools you have that fit those motivations. All right? Now, if you're going to work with them, look, respect goes a long, long way. And if you reward their loyalty, they'll likely be more loyal to you. If you are loyal to them, they will be extremely loyal to you, and they will reward that loyalty. It means a lot to them. You're connecting to them through that pride and through that loyalty motivation. They'll recognize your knowledge, but they'll test you too. And that's their experience. That's what they've been through. And we've probably all had this done to us, right? I can think of a dozen people early in my career that would say, hey, you know what, youngin', you seem to be a pretty smart little fella, but answer me this. And they will continuously test you. I find myself doing it to the younger generation now. I don't know if that makes me an old man or not, but I do. And so know that when they test you, it's not a sign of disrespect. They're just wanting to contribute. They're just wanting to see how much you do know, and they're really just trying to set themselves apart as, look, I've got all this experience. Use my experience. Make sense? A little bit? If you can be polite and respectful, it'll go a long way. You will need to help them embrace technology. This is just a function of growing up. I mean, we said the radio formed part of who they are. The radio. Not the cell phone, not the internet. All right? So they may need some help in embracing technology. But if you're respectful and kind and share your knowledge with them, hey, they're going to reward that kind of loyalty and that kind of respect. All right? In terms of a customer, they prefer dealing with the telephone. They prefer talking to you over the telephone. I won't say they're not as likely to text, although they're probably not as likely to text. That's not saying they will not text, because many of them are beginning to embrace technology. And they're beginning to figure out that it's kind of cool and it can kind of get a good job done for us. So help them embrace it. In terms of the customer, just remember the customer may want to deal with you over the phone or in person rather than via text or email. Okay? Now, face-to-face communication works well. As I said, they may want to deal with you in person. They may not work very well at this point under pressure. Now, I'd like to just make a little caveat here. They have the knowledge to work very well under pressure. And they're probably highly efficient. But the synapses may not be firing as fast as they used to. I mean, heck, I noticed that at this point in my life. You add another 40 years to me, I don't know what I'm going to be like. Probably pretty dumb. So they may not work well under pressure just because they may need a little bit more time to think about things. But they certainly enjoy working in teams. They will contribute to teams. And they can direct teams very well. Very, very positive attributes here with the traditionalists. They lend stability. They show and prove loyalty. They've got a ton of knowledge. They've got good communication skills face-to-face and over the phone. You can learn from traditionalists. You can learn from them and you can use them to bolster your organization. Now, baby boomers, the next younger generation, many of whom are beginning to retire now. These individuals, they're generally classified as 46 to 64, although you can probably bump that up a little bit now, and maybe they're closer to 48 to 50 today. So 48, 50 to 66, 68, somewhere in there. Because as time marches on, so do these parameters, these age parameters. Their lives are partially defined by the Vietnam War. In many ways, that did form who they were, what they stood for, or what they stood against. Woodstock may have played a major role in their younger lives. And there was a very strong focus on raising children. They're very family-oriented, is how I think of them. They had a lot of kids. They raised big families many times, sometimes only one or two children, but they were very, very family-oriented. The characteristics of these baby boomers, as you can see here, they're very, very competitive. Well, this was the economic environment that they grew up in and entered the workforce within. So they're very competitive. Achievement means a lot to them. They're very success motivated, achievement motivated. They want to accomplish things. They're accomplishers. Because of that, oftentimes the baby boomers are called workaholics. Now, I fit, and I'll be honest with you, I am probably right in between this generation and the next generation we'll talk about. I was taught to be a workaholic. People tell me I work way too much. So I can relate to this. I am very success-oriented, I am very achievement-oriented, and I am extremely competitive. However, I do not consider myself a baby boomer. Maybe I should, but I am right on the edge of this. Okay, so I can relate a little bit to this. I don't know, how about you? What can you relate to? Anything yet? Baby boomers are also team players, just like the traditionalists were. They're very loyal to their career, not so much loyal to the organization. So a little bit of a difference there. Traditionalists, very loyal to the organization, very stable in the workforce, create stability in the workforce. Baby boomers, they'll move around a little bit more. The attitude used to be with the traditionalists, get with a good company, be good to the company will be good to you. And then their offspring, the baby boomers, discovered that stability wasn't always what the traditionalists thought it was. And that in some cases there was no stability. And so they became loyal to their career, not just an organization. To go along with the achievement, success-oriented individual, they're also very ambitious. Of course, you can see that those would go together. And they're willing to work a lot. They're willing to go the extra mile. They're usually consensus builders. They want everybody to agree before we move forward, but not always. But not always. Sometimes they're okay moving on with a project even if everybody doesn't agree. But generally they like to build a consensus and say, all right, yep, that's what we're all going to go do. If you're going to motivate baby boomers, you got to take advantage of this. They're workaholics, they're ambitious, they're team players for the most part, recognize and reward their good work. If you keep them busy, you'll likely never have a problem. You'll likely never have a complaint from them if you keep them busy. Promotions and titles for them are achievements. It means success, and so it's meaningful to them. So if you can give them titles, you can give them promotions, and I know in your organizations, especially the smaller ones, that's not always possible. I see some of you try it. I see some of you give the service manager title to certain individuals because they've been with you for a while and you feel like you need to give them something meaningful, whether they're baby boomers or not. But you don't give them the authority and you don't give them the responsibility of the title, and it's just a title and it really doesn't mean a whole lot anymore. So be careful with promotions and titles. Look, if there's no place for them in your organization, there's no place for them. You can reward work and reward good work in other ways than just promotions and titles. But keep baby boomers busy. Recognize their appearance. Recognize that they're professional. Include them on the team because of certain skill sets or certain attributes that they possess. Give them frequent recognition. That is a big motivator for them. That will keep them working, keep them engaged, keep them helping the organization move forward. Stay away from the old-timer references. Old-timers to them are the traditionalists. Every generation is searching for their own identity, both as an individual and as a generation. The baby boomers did not want to be placed in with their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation. They were different. Build relationships with them. Again, recognize their achievements. Let them know what they bring to the table rather than saying, hey, you know what, you've passed your prime, old-timer. Okay? Excuse me. So we have the traditionalists and we have the baby boomers. And so that category is essentially about 48, 50 years old all the way up. You likely have baby boomers working for you. You may be a baby boomer watching this. Think about what motivates you. Think about why it bothers you when Generation X comes along and the attributes they possess that are so different than the baby boomers. Because the traditionalists feel the same way about the baby boomers. And we have to recognize these differences in each other to begin to bridge these gaps. Now, Generation X, somewhere between 30 to 45, 30 to 50 years old. I should probably push that a little bit older now, maybe 32 to 50, somewhere in there. Okay? Their lives are partially defined by the Challenger disaster. And I made the comment in the last section of the baby boomers that I tend to kind of fit in there. I recognize these attributes in myself. Well, I look at this and I go, yeah, you know what? The Challenger disaster was pretty formative in my early days. I'll never forget watching it with my entire school in the cafeteria when the Challenger exploded. And so it made you think, it made you realize that, yeah, things are changing, but things are not always stable. Things are not always the way that you want them to be. The Reagan administration was another big one. The assassination attempt on Reagan, I'll never forget. I'll remember where I was forever. And the attitudes of my parents towards that administration, I will remember. So again, I'm probably right between these two generations. We also, many Gen Xers grew up with fractured families. And this is when, you know, the baby boomers raised tight families and were very family oriented, and then Gen X, for whatever reason, and I don't pretend to be a social psychologist here, but for whatever reason, things were changing, and Gen X tended to come from fractured families. The baby boomers the families began to split apart. And so Gen X grew up with these fractured families. The older ones that had kids, they were often divorced or single parents. And this began to form part of their mentality in the workplace. You know, the baby boomers were workaholics. Well, yeah, they could. Gen X, single parents, they couldn't be the same workaholic that the baby boomers were because they had other responsibilities that were looming large that they had to take care of because of the family structure. Gen X, for these reasons and others, they're looking for a work-life balance. And this I relate to very well. I struggled with this for a long time. I say I'm a workaholic, and I really am a workaholic. But I still want the work-life balance. I want the time off when I need the time off when I want to go do whatever I do in my time off. I dislike rules. That makes me kind of a Gen Xer. And it's not that we don't recognize that rules are there for a reason or that we need rules. Gen Xers do recognize that you need rules. They just find it constraining, and so they'll try to bend them, or they'll just try to see how far that rule can really get pushed. They're very loyal to their relationships rather than to organizations. And this was somewhat true. You saw the baby boomers drift away from find a good company, be good to them, they'll be good to you, because in their generation they started to see major companies begin to break up. Polaroid comes to mind because that was a big player in my family. I had family members that worked at Polaroid. I remember when Polaroid disappeared, the shock on the traditionalist faces and the baby boomers because it was such a stable influence in our lives. Well, the Gen Xers saw these breakups begin to happen along with their families, and they realized, hey, you know what? Nobody's going to look out for me but me. And so they tend to be very loyal to their friends, to their relationships, but not to their companies. Are they still loyal to their careers like baby boomers? Yes, very definitely. Very definitely still loyal to their careers as well. Other characteristics, very tech savvy. Of course, this is the internet generation. This is the computer generation. It helped make them very independent. They're very independent thinkers. That's part of that dislike of rules things. They're very adaptable as well. And so can you use any of this? Yes, you really can. If you're a traditionalist watching this, look, these are three really good attributes. You may not like the attitude. You may not like the independent attitude. You may not like the need or quest for work-life balance. But look at the positive attributes here. They're very tech-savvy. You can use them. You can use them to grow your business, to grow your productivity, to increase your connection with your customers through technology. They're very independent. They can work on their own. They can work by themselves. They're independent thinkers. So use these characteristics along with that adaptability to move your business forward, to move your organization forward. Gen Xers were entrepreneurial. That was part of the independent thinking. They're very comfortable giving and receiving feedback. That's just the world they grew up in. You can give them feedback and they don't get offended at it. Other generations, you give them feedback and sometimes they are offended by it. But they expect immediate feedback because this is also part of their world, right? This was part of the television they grew up with, the computer they grew up with. They caught the very beginning of the cell phone thing, and they got really used to immediate feedback. So they don't want to wait for feedback. They want to hear, did I do good? Did I not do good? All right? So very positive attributes, but again, you've got to look at them and see how can I utilize those and what are their motivations? Because I got to motivate them somehow. Well, you can motivate by giving them some freedom. You can motivate them with time. Motivate them with time off. Motivate them with learning. And those all fit with that work-life balance. It's a little bit different. It's a challenge for a traditionalist and a baby boomer. And I understand this because, again, I'm between the baby boomer and Gen X. I want the work-life balance, and yet I'm a workaholic. Well, what does that look like? That looks like if I can have freedom, I will work all hours of the day. But on the day that I choose not to work so hard, that's got to be okay. In an automotive production environment, this is a real challenge, isn't it? But there are production schedules, there are work schedules that I talk to shops about. I can't get anybody to do it, but this is what it's about. It's about providing a compensation package, about providing a work environment where Gen Xers can thrive. Because let's face it, baby boomers are getting older now. Are some still productive in terms of repairs and maintenance and diagnostics? Yes, they are. But they're not 25 anymore. And so you've got these Gen Xers in the prime of their lives, in their 30s and their early 40s here, that can still be highly productive. Can we set up a work schedule so they work 4 days a week and get 3 days off? Wow, that would mean a lot to some of them. Can we set up a training program so that they can continuously learn, get certificates, get certifications, and maybe earn some extra time off? That would mean a lot to them. Can we be a little bit flexible with that work-life balance piece for them? Because if you can do these things, it's motivating. We're talking about motivating these generations. And if you provide that generation, whether it's traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X so far, provide them what motivates them, you've got a great employee, a fantastic employee. But you got to think about it. Give their decision-making empowerment. It's that independent streak in them, that entrepreneurial streak. Let them give their feedback. I talk in a lot of classes about this. Don't just tell people what you want them to do. Don't just tell them how it's going to be. But solicit feedback, especially with Gen X. If they give their input, they're more bought into the organization. And they're much happier. And they make much better employees. If you can give them flexible work schedules. I mentioned a minute, the 410 work schedule. If you don't know what that is, give me a call, shoot me an email, find me on servicesalesacademy.com, and we'll talk about the 410 work schedule. It's 4 10-hour days, and it rotates, and it's fantastic. Every 5 or 6 weeks, I get a full week off without taking time off. It's a fantastic flexible work schedule. Really works for Generation X. Listen to them. Let them have their input. It makes them feel empowered. They value their time, so don't waste it. They hate wasted time. See, I relate to that as well. I cannot stand hurry up and wait. It drives me bananas. I will walk away if I think somebody or something is wasting my time. I just don't have a place for it. So they value their time. Fill the time. Keep them busy. They don't mind working. They just want the balance. That's all. Include them in the decision making. Provide what you want to see for a desired outcome. Give them the result you want to see and let them figure out how to get there. They don't like being told what to do. So if you can avoid telling them how to do things, it's very empowering to them. That's the entrepreneurial piece. That's the independence piece. They are good thinkers and they are knowledgeable. Remember, they value feedback and they're very good at taking and giving feedback. Give them the outcome that you want to have, what you want to make happen, and let them figure out how to get there. I know it's hard for some of you to do. It's hard for me to do. It takes a conscious letting go. But you can do it. I promise you, you can do it. Next generation, and the last one that we'll have right now, until I don't know what we're calling Generation Z, I think it is actually, coming along next. The Millennials. So the Millennials are really 12 to 30, 31, 32 right now. So this covers everybody left in the workforce, but we've got Gen Z coming up, and they're getting darn close to some of the millennial ages here. So we'll be talking about them in the next couple of years. They're partially defined by the internet. Look, they grew up with the internet. The internet existed while they were 3 years old, and so they grew up with the internet. Many of them grew up in single-parent homes, and because of that, in part, they were very protected as children. Remember that each generation tries to make up for what the generation that raised them didn't provide. And right or wrong, I'm not judging this, because look, I do the same thing with my children. But we are defined by our environment, and we're defined by how our parents raise us, how that generation above us raises us, or the generation that walked before, excuse me. They're not above, nor are they below. The characteristics of the millennials are that they are good team players, they're extremely tech savvy, and because they were, I won't say coddled, but because they were nurtured well as children, they're extremely confident. Sometimes to a fault. Sometimes the confidence comes across as cockiness. Sometimes it comes across as an unwillingness to learn. Again, this is just part of their generation. It's not, don't take it personally. This is how they were raised. You can still work with it. We also sometimes call millennials Generation Y. I don't know, so we got Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z. Are they going to be the last generation, or are we going to start over again? I have no idea. Millennial characteristics continued. They're loyal to themselves and to relationships. Not necessarily loyal to the organization. I'm sure you've seen some of those. They're multitaskers, of course. They try to do everything at once. Now, we know scientifically, cognitively, you can't do that, but this generation was raised to do many things at once. They'll sit there with a video game, their homework, and the TV on. It drives me bananas, but this is one of the things that they do. We could argue good, bad, or otherwise, but we're not going to in this program. We're just describing these generations and how we can work with them. They're often very well defined by the internet because they grew up with the internet. It was always there for them. They ask why a lot. Well, they grew up in the information age, right? And the answers were at their fingertips. So they can ask why all the day long, and they can get answers. Because of that instant gratification piece and being able to get answers, I struggle with this one a little bit because I do understand it. They don't like the you've got to pay your dues attitude. And that, for our environment in the automotive repair industry, that is a significant challenge, isn't it? Because we all know how we came into the business. We all know that we didn't start doing diagnostics day one, that we didn't start doing alignments day one, we didn't start doing engine work day one, but we started changing oil, and we started sweeping the parking lot, and we started cleaning the shop, and we worked our way up. And this generation especially, and a little bit in the previous generation, the Gen Xers, they don't really like that, you got to pay your dues attitude. And I don't blame them, because part of the challenge I have with this is that technology and information has come so far that they're in a different place than we were. We had to pay our dues. We had to learn from experience. They don't necessarily have to. They can get information much more quickly, and so they need probably half of the information that we did. Do they still need experience? Yes, they do, and I'm not doing a very good job articulating this, I don't think. But the pay your dues attitude, you have to figure out how to work around this. You have to give them enough technology, enough big projects, enough engine work, enough computer diag stuff for them to feel comfortable that they're doing what they were brought up to do, doing what they went to school to do, doing what they came into the industry to do, and balance that with the dues that they have to pay. They'll be paying their own dues. And when they're traditionalists someday and they're looking back, they'll say the same thing. Well, look, you know what? You got to pay your dues. We start at the bottom. You got to work your way up. Well, the bottom changes. The bottom changes, and the information that they need to learn changes. And so I think we're struggling with this right now as an industry that's pretty old and pretty old school most of the time. So just know that they ask why a lot. They're used to instant information because they grew up with the internet. and they dislike the you got to pay your dues attitude. If you can challenge them, and that's kind of what I was getting at a minute ago, if you can challenge them, give them some diagnostics, let them use the technology, let them show you what they can do, while at the same time educating them, offer them training, offer them opportunities for education. Mentoring goes a long way with this generation. Mentoring works really well with both the millennials and the Gen Xers, so the Gen Xers and the Gen Yers. Mentoring works really, really well. But that's part of that balance I'm talking about. The mentoring helps balance having to pay your dues with the teaching training if they really want. They're thirsty for knowledge. They're used to getting it quickly. So good mentoring will challenge them. It'll let them use the technology. It'll help educate them, and it'll help balance that having to pay your dues with the things that they want to be doing right now. Something to really think about. And on that note, we did do a program on mentoring. You can go to servicesalesacademy.com, go to the VILT tab, log in there and look for the mentoring program and take a look at it. It's about developing a mentoring program for your repair shop. Really important, and there's some really good resources associated with that program. Back to working with millennials, answer their questions. They'll have lots of them, and if you don't answer them, they're going to go find their own answers. And when they go find their own answers, they're going to come back and they're going to be asking why an awful lot more. So help answer their questions. If you don't know, say you don't know. Say, hey, let's go find out. Let's go figure that out. That'll go a long way in connecting with them. Because part of that's asking their opinion. Part of that is showing them, hey, you know what? I don't know everything either. Let's go check this out. Because that furthermore shows an interest in them too. So answer their questions. Get okay with saying, I don't know. Let's go figure this out together. And you'll form that bond. I don't care if you're a traditionalist, if you're a baby boomer, if you're a Gen Xer, you will form a bond with them if you show that interest in them, and it will go a long way to their development and your workplace satisfaction. The mentoring program, I've already mentioned. I cannot overemphasize the mentoring thing enough. It's not as easy as it sounds. Go check out the program on servicesalesacademy.com. Include the millennials, the Gen Xers, I get all mixed up, the Gen Yers I should say, not the Gen Xers. Include them in the training programs. Teach them leadership. They have no leadership skills. They're too young right now. They haven't developed them yet. So the traditionalists, the baby boomers, and the Gen Xers can all teach them leadership. It will serve them well. They're thirsty. They want to learn. Do it. Get a mentoring program going for them. Now, I have an observation about all this that I'm curious about. It seems to me that when you go out and you research the generations and generation gaps and characteristics of generations, most of the material has been written by Gen X and the baby boomers. So why I bring that observation up is that it may be a little bit biased. It may be a little bit biased, and I go back to what we started the whole program with, and that is none of these are absolutes. None of these are absolutes. You can have the characteristics of all four of these generations that we mentioned, and there's nothing wrong with that. The big key is to identify what the motivators are. And look, even if you don't want to think about this generationally, I do the same thing when I go in and work with shops. I will get to know an individual. The most recent example is going over to Europe and working over there, and I use it because I was thrown into a completely different world. Completely different world. And I went, I know how to motivate them. You pay them more. You use this pay plan and that pay plan. And all of a sudden I realized, no, that doesn't work because they're not motivated by money. They're motivated by vacations. They're motivated by holiday, they call it. They're motivated by things. They're motivated by the things they don't have enough of. Money doesn't mean anything to them. I mean, they're taxed at like 50, 60%, so you pay them more, they just got to give up more. They don't even want to see more money. Some do, but many don't. And so you've got to look at the characteristics of these generations, no matter who wrote the information, and say, okay, these are the characteristics. How do I utilize them? How do I leverage them within my organization to move the organization forward? And how do I motivate using these? That's the big key to bridging the gaps. So we got to work together. And that's just one of the reasons to bridge the gaps. You got to have the employees, obviously, and none of us are getting any younger. I mean, generationally, it's changing every day. And there's got to be some sort of succession plan, right? And market demographics are changing all the time, so your customers are going through the same thing that you're going through internally. So we've got to figure out how to work together. And there's a lot of ideas people have, but again, it takes you being the change that you want to see to initiate these things. You've got to understand the differences, and you've got to work with them. Again, back to the motivation piece. You've got to understand the motivations and work with those motivations. You've got to have conversations. You've got to build projects or build teams to get the conversations going sometimes. I'm going to talk to you about shop meetings again, because that's really what this is. Shop meetings are communication. It's pulling the team together once a week, once a day, once a quarter, whatever it is for you. Because it's that team feeling that allows the conversations to happen, that allows these little projects to go on, that allows everybody to get to know each other. If you can work to bring these generations together through community events, that's a really successful one when it comes to bringing generations together. If you can do it through holiday events during work, because we've got to value that work-life balance. Holiday events, you can have each generation bring something that means something to them. I mean, holiday events are great ways to get to know and understand the generations that you're working with. Even lunch events will work. You can have awareness days. I thought this was kind of a cool idea. And you have to be a pretty talented manager to pull this off, okay? Because you don't want to be in your face with this. You don't want to be too over the top with this, but you want to very subtly let each generation show off what they can do, what their major skill set is, what their major talent or characteristic that they bring to the table is. And it showcases that generational knowledge. So it could be the use of tablets in the shop, and let the youngin show you how to do it. Look, I used to call, they're probably traditionalists now. I don't want to think how long ago it was, but I used to call dealerships up. We launched this new scan tool, and it could talk about anything on the planet, and the old timers in there, man, ooh, not the baby boomers, oh, we can't call them old timers, right? The older generation in the repair shops were just, dude, I don't know how to do this. I'd love to email this thing to you, but I don't even have an email. And what would I say to them? Go find the youngest kid in the shop, and they'll show you how to do it. And they would laugh, or there'd be silence on the other end of the line. I'd say, no, I'm serious. Go find the youngest guy in the shop and tell them what you need to do. Just tell them you need to email this. They'll figure it out for you. And so these awareness days help generations showcase what they're really, really good at. So it could be tablets, it could be smartphones, it could be telephone skills, it could be, hey, you know what, I want to talk about using books today. Remember books back in the day? Tips and tricks, and just let them share their knowledge. But make sure you do it in a work context. Again, it's a little, I know it's not warm and fuzzy for all of you, and it takes a good manager to pull this off, but it works, it can bring people together. Establish a mission for your organization, something that can pull everybody together, and stick to the mission, because it will create common goals. It does a lot of things, and we talk about mission statements in one of our virtual programs, but really, once you have a mission, you can hire to that mission. And once you hire to that mission, some of the generation gaps go away, because people are so bought into the mission and the common goal and the sense of community, and that we're all on the same team, we're all pulling for the same thing, that generationally it really doesn't matter anymore. So things to think about. This is a little more complex than we have time to get into here, but if you think about what do we stand for, what is our mission as an organization, and solicit input from everybody in the organization, you can create a vision for the organization that everybody buys into, and you'll help smooth some of these generational gaps and make things a little bit easier in the workplace. Look, you can also provide regular education opportunities. Most of you are doing that. This is part of that, so that you can offer that to everybody. Use different media. Use classroom, use instructor-led programs, use e-learning, use these videos, use hands-on. Every generation learns differently because that's what they grew up with. And as a training organization, I struggle with that. I'll admit it. I've been promising you big changes this year, and we have some coming. We're on the verge of it. But this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're going to bring you a gaming app. We're going to shorten these videos to 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to provide instructor-led training to all of you. And we've got some internet web-based tools in between to pull all of this together. just to do this very thing, to help bridge generation gaps and help increase the learning that's out there. So this can be true of technical training, service advisor training, computer software training, whatever training that you're interested in. Still, I have more ideas. Imagine that. Establish generational specific compensation programs. This one's also a challenge unless you're pretty flexible and you're pretty free thinker in terms of an owner or a manager. But if you can build in some flexible schedules, the 4-10 schedule I'm a big fan of. Look, I know shops doing 3-12s. I don't recommend that one, but the 4-10s allows everybody time off. It allows everybody to work the hours they usually work anyway. You could have tuition programs. You could have tool programs. Make sure you have insurance as part of your compensation. You can have, various creative paid plans focused on the primary generations that you have within your organization. So if you really want to learn to manage multiple generations, identify what you have in the organization and play to that. Play to those strengths, play to those motivations, create compensation plans that play to those motivations. It'll move you as an organization forward, and it will tie those people even tighter to your organization. You really, really want to establish mentoring programs and work with the local high schools, work with the local colleges to do this, especially if you're on the advisory boards or you work with the younger kids that come in. It will help you in hiring in the long run. I mean, to me, it's one of the best things you can do for your long-term hiring. It helps you to understand younger generations as well. And by creating a mentor program, it will help you understand education, period. It'll kind of uncover some of the management challenges in your organization. It is not easy, and not everybody makes a good mentor. Not everybody can pull that off. But if you want to start a mentoring program, give me a call. We'll talk about what we can get set up for you, all right? Incentivize Gen Y to enter the industry, or the Gen Z to enter the industry. Somehow we've got to get the younger people into our industry. And that means using technology. That means providing training opportunities. That means providing mentor programs. Getting away from you got to pay your dues. You got to show up and just change oil. Changing oil ain't sexy. And I know it wasn't when we had to do it, okay? But if you want to grow the industry, and the industry has a problem with technicians right now, you know that. You've got to make it sexier for these Gen Z and young Gen Ys to come in. One last idea, establish specific goals. I use a goal-setting software that you will have access to as part of this program going forward, I hope, because goals are really, really important as a human being. You've got to connect something in each generation to their whatever motivates them. And you can do that through goals. And goals will also help your organization move forward. So if you can provide incentives to accomplish goals, incentives beyond just money. It doesn't have to just be money. It could be time off. It could be a special trip. It could be, look, if we hit these marks, then we'll all go to SEMA next year, or we'll all go to Vision next year. Whatever it may be. But provide some platform for learning and growth, and make sure that goal setting is part of it. Traditionalists will love it. The baby boomers will love it. Gen Y will take it and run with it. And Gen X will take it and run with it. So goal setting is so important to the growth of your organization today. It really, truly is. And look, as part of all that, I promised you I was going to talk about regular shop meetings. And I know I harp on these a lot, but regular shop meetings are so incredibly important. It helps bring team together. It helps focus the organization. It helps keep things out in the open and keep the communication going. If you can do 5-minute daily production meetings, that's a big help. Not every one of you can pull that off, so you all don't have to do that. But have weekly shop meetings, or if you can't be weekly, do it monthly. But here are my 3 rules again for holding a shop meeting. It has to be short. 15 to 20 minutes is all you want. Have people come in at 7:30 in the morning. I prefer before work rather than after work. Get them in sooner. They're fresh, they're ready to go. Get them in 15 to 20 minutes. If they're there a half hour early, you can spend 5 minutes to get the stragglers together. You can spend 15 to 20 minutes talking, and that leaves them 10 minutes before they have to go to work to go have a cigarette, coffee, bathroom break, whatever it may be. If you're going to do this, not only do you have to keep it short, but you absolutely have to be consistent with it. Consistency will allow you to attain the benefits of these shop meetings. And then if you want it to not be a gripe session, or you can use whatever word you choose, you know what it turns into, have an agenda. Use these videos. Use a piece of these videos. When we move to the shorter format, you'll probably like that much better. We're actually going to have an app where the videos will be available on your phone. But use the short videos as a subject for your meeting to talk about. Have an agenda. Have something specific to talk about so it doesn't just turn into a complaint session. Be consistent with when you have the meetings and keep the meetings short. It will work wonders in helping you bridge your generation gaps. It'll help everybody come together, pull together, be on the same team. It'll help everybody begin to see that they actually have a lot more similarities than they have differences, and it'll begin to get a dialogue going. Here's an example agenda. If you want to make one up, and look, you can sit down, and they can be this short. You know, I suggest you open with something positive, and then continue with something customer related. And then talk about something about productivity. And you can plan out 12 meeting agendas tomorrow. Set an hour aside, write down 12 agendas. Or do it before you go to work, or come in early and do it before you start work. Something positive. Last week's productivity, best ever. Record sales month, record sales week. Johnny Technician received their ASE master status. Whatever it may be, I don't care. And then move on to something customer related. You know, look, let's talk about phone calls. Let's talk about selling. Let's talk about customer relationships. Let's talk about our follow-up. You know, ideas to improve the timeliness of the phone answering. You know, how do we reduce comebacks? Things like that. Not rocket science, right? And then the third thing you should have on the agenda is something production related, because productivity is where you make all your money. So, you know, is it a tool issue? Is it, you know, we buy new equipment and we need an update on the status of it? Is it, you know, how do we increase our speed of diag? How do we increase our speed of repair? You know, workflow ideas, things like that. Have the shop meeting to help bridge these generation gaps, to help bring everybody together as a team, and have an agenda that helps move the organization forward as a business. A few final thoughts as we wrap things up, folks. You've got to see everybody as a person. Each one of these generations are the way they are for a very good reason. Whether you think it's a good reason or not, whether you like the way they are or not, does not matter. You have to be respectful of each other because they are the way they are for very good reasons. You and I were all young once, and we will be old. And so we've all been there, or will be there. Think about it. Be open. Create an environment for that open communication. Use those shop meetings. People are still people. At the end of the day, talk to each other. Try to understand each other's motivations. Why do I do what I do? Why do I say what I say? Why do I act the way I act? See past the looks, see past the jewelry, the tats, the hobbies, the language. See past all of that. See people for people. And that will allow you to utilize everyone's talents and everyone's knowledge. So important in today's environment, so important. Because we all have these common denominators. Each generation values teamwork. Each generation values open communication, and we all value rewards. Hey, look at that. 4 generations, maybe 5 now, actually have something in common. If you look for it, you'll find it. You look for the bad, you'll find the bad. You look for the good, you'll find the good. Look for the good. Okay? Folks, I'll stick around for a few questions. I hope you've all taken something out of this that you can go back to the shop and do something with. Watch for the changes coming next month, okay? And until we meet again, keep up the great work and never, ever stop learning.